You vote for Kamala Harris, you're voting for the most liberal president in history by far.
She's clearly not stupid. She's eloquent. She's articulate.
You make a mistake if you think she's articulate. She is not. She can read the teleprompter. She can't think extemporaneously.
It is incredibly bizarre that the President of the United States of America, a few weeks out from the convention, decided to pull out of the race and did not address the nation. So the fact that people would speculate about that, I think, is totally reasonable.
Joe Biden was forced out by his own brain, Ben. Joe Biden's brain did a coup on Joe Biden.
Leave. You're on the Titanic and you hit an iceberg and there's a really crappy little dinghy boat in the middle of the water. That boat looks amazing to you in that moment because it's a life raft and it might save your life. That is Kamala Harris's campaign right now.
Brat Girl Summer will not be enough to change the hearts and minds of America's young people because under Kamala Harris, what you will have is a broke girl summer.
President Biden is alive. That wouldn't normally make for a particularly good headline, would it? But given the state of his health, his abandoned campaign, and his complete absence from public view this week, it came as something of a relief. The president has still yet to be seen since Sunday's bombshell announcement, but he dialed in to a Kamala Harris campaign event last night with a very reassuring message, particularly for Republicans.
And by the way, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be out there in the campaign with her, with Kamala. I'm going to be working like hell, both as a sitting president, getting legislation passed, as well as in campaigning. You know, what we still need to save this democracy. And Trump is still a danger to the community. He's a danger to the nation.
I'm not going anywhere, he says. I'll be out campaigning with Kamala. Well, given his ratings, she might not want him to. In a sign of the awkwardness ahead in this uniquely bizarre and sensational campaign, the ailing president lingered on the call like an elderly grandparent yelling, "You still there?"
You guys heard it from Doug's voice. We love Joe and Jill. We really do. They truly are like family to us. And we do, everybody here does.
It's mutual.
I knew you were still there. You're not going anywhere, Joe.
I'm watching it, kid.
I'll be watching you, he warns, booming in like the ghost of elections past. Well, President Biden now says he'll allegedly address the nation tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Vice President Harris, meanwhile, is cruising to the nomination. Democratic titans like Nancy Pelosi and St. George Clooney have endorsed her. Donations are pouring in. Now she has the delegates to see off any serious challenges too. The open convention has become more like one of our British coronations. Clearly, I'm not advising her campaign, but I would say the spectre of Joe Biden is probably the last thing she needs right now if she wants to close the gap on former President Trump. Harris will campaign as a black female leader with a compelling message about a prosecutor against a convicted felon. She's 19 years younger than Trump. Like Biden, she can often be incoherent, but unlike Biden, the words coming out of her mouth are the ones she intended to use. As unpopular as she may be at the moment, her candidacy has the potential to stoke the Liberal base and win over voters who saw Biden's campaign as an increasing farce. And that's why Trump supporters should be careful what they wish for.
I have suggested that the president should resign. The reason is, if everyone acknowledges that he is incapable of running a campaign, then he's clearly incapable of running the country. I mean, he has the nuclear codes. He has major decisions that he has to make every single hour of every day, and he does not have the faculties to do so now. We are suggesting and calling upon him to resign and do the right thing for the country.
Well, they're right, of course. There are very serious questions about Biden's fitness for office. Some of us have been asking them for years, even as Democrats assured us that he was so sharp he could slice concrete. But acting up in the Oval Office could benefit Kamala Harris, just as the omni-shambles of Biden can only benefit Trump. The best strategy for the former president may be the one he's tended to like the least, to stand back and let the lunatics run the asylum, for now. Later on, I'll talk to Bill O'Reilly about all this. But first, to debate, I'm joined by the host of the Bitchuation Room, Francesca Fiorentini, the former Republican congressman and presidential candidate Joe Walsh, the co-host of A Verdict with Ted Cruz, Ben Ferguson, and the host of Part of the Problem podcast, Dave Smith, and Chris Mowrey from Chris and Harry Unplugged. Now, Ben, I know you've got to leave fairly soon, so I want to start with you. Is it in the Republican interests that Joe Biden lingers around like a bad old smell for as long as possible?
Yeah, careful what you wish for. I think there's two parts to this. Look, I would love to see Joe Biden be okay. And I mean that from a health perspective, the fact that he's been hiding, that we haven't seen him. I'm glad that apparently he's doing better and he's going to address the nation tomorrow night. At the same time, if he's clearly incapacitated, you need someone to actually be the acting president of the United States of America, not a de facto president, which is what Kamala is right now. Look, there's a yin and yang here. If you see Kamala as president, does it help her campaign? Maybe. But if she's the Kamala Harris that we've learned to know, I think it could also just be a disaster for a presidential campaign. It's truly a coin flip at this point. So, yeah, be careful what you wish for in one aspect of this. But at the same time, it's like, all right, let's see what Harris looks like. I don't believe it's a great product. I don't believe she's going to be a great president if she's filling in. I think she's a disaster when you see her on stage. And I think she's unlikable. And the Democrats decided that in the last presidential primary they had with her. They didn't like her. They didn't vote for it. They didn't support her. They didn't give her money. This is a coronation now. So let's see Kamala Harris. I think she's running the country right now. So let's let her have the job.
OK, I mean, Francesca, I watched Kamala Harris's first big speech yesterday, the one where Biden called in, and the contrast between the two of them couldn't be more glaring. I mean, Biden just sounded like a very old man doddering his way through a sort of call to wish everybody well. She did look the part. I mean, she's very telegenic. She's obviously intelligent. She was warm. She cracked some jokes. She had a few zingers about Trump. And whilst everything Ben has said is true, everything changes when you become the presidential candidate for your party. And there is a chance here for the Democrats to have a massive and dramatic reset if she plays it right.
I mean, yeah, and even if she plays it wrong, Piers, I mean, even if she can just end a full sentence and be nominally coherent, she's a much better option for not just Democratic voters, but I think independents and undecideds who obviously see Donald Trump. They know all the drama that comes along with him, and they're like, yeah, let's go with this. Let's take a chance. But look, I think this is a massive win for Trump. I don't understand why the right's not happier. You guys need to be happy. Okay, Donald Trump beat Joe Biden and not a single ballot was cast. Boom. I don't know why this is not more of a cause for celebration. I understand that your Superman does have a kryptonite, which happens to be Black female prosecutors, you know, Tanya Chutkin and Letitia James, Fani Willis, and now, oops, Kamala Harris. But I still think you should just take a win. I love, you know, there's a lot of whining going on, and I don't get it. Like, in no world does, like, a baseball team get to sue another baseball team because, like, they put in a left-handed relief pitcher instead of a righty, and they were prepping for the righty. What's going on?
Yeah, but let me say this in response quickly. It's not whining. This is different, and Republicans know it's different because, number one, the media is about to give $1 billion to $2 billion in in-kind donation to the Harris campaign with a 30-day Democratic convention telling everyone that she is amazing. Number two, perspectives change. If you're on the Titanic and you hit an iceberg and there's a really crappy little dingy boat in the middle of the water, that boat looks amazing to you in that moment because it's a life raft and it might save your life. That is Kamala Harris's campaign right now. You're compared to a ship that's going down, and the only thing that can possibly save you is that crappy little ship in the sea, which you'll be in love with for the next 3 or 4 months. So it's not whining, it's just knowing, knowing what's going to happen here.
So I love your analogy, and let me just
okay,
double check that.
Does that mean that couldn't resist
wait? Does that mean that Donald Trump is the iceberg?
Hang on, Francesca. Let me get Dave to respond to that.
No, that's not what I said, and I think you know that.
No, the iceberg's Donald Trump.
Okay, Dave Smith.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think that there's a lot of relief amongst Democrats right now because they were very concerned with the problems that Joe Biden has as a candidate. The issue is, look, there's a reason why we've all been speculating about Gavin Newsom and Hillary Clinton. And from the very beginning, when there was always a question mark over whether Joe Biden would make it or not, there is a reason why people skipped over Kamala Harris as the next option. And the reason is because she's a deeply unpopular vice president. She has never been a great political candidate. And the reality of the situation is that despite the enormous spin that's going on right now, it is not true that Joe Biden made some decision that his country is more important than him. He fought everyone until the very bitter end. Kamala Harris has a serious uphill battle right now to try to beat Donald Trump. She's only got a few weeks till convention. I'm not saying this as a Trump supporter who's whining. I'm just looking at the situation in front of me. Donald Trump is the overwhelming favorite right now.
Yeah, I think that's completely true, and certainly in the swing states. Joe Walsh, what do you make of this? And I can't ever remember a period in American politics quite like this in my entire lifetime. I was born in 1965. It's absolutely extraordinary, the series of events. The fact that there was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump where he was hit by bullets and we're not actually leading with that so soon after it happened is remarkable. But it's a very fast-moving thing, this. And the thing about politics is momentum can play a big part. You know, Trump has arguably, you could say, peaked way too early here in this campaign. You know, everything's riding well for him. He's doing great. The comeback is in place. It's all secure. Looks like he can't lose. But as he said to me on the phone on Saturday night when we spoke, 4 months is a very long time in politics. We've just seen what can happen in 3 weeks. You know, 3.5 weeks ago, there was the debate to come, and Joe Biden was telling everyone, I'm going to take Trump down at the debate. Well, you know, 3.5 weeks later, he's gone. So anything can happen here. What's your reading, Joe, of where we are?
And Pierce, I agree 100%. We are living in unprecedented times. I mean, the past 8 to 9 years. 3.5 years ago, a sitting president lost an election, and he still hasn't conceded. And he tried to overthrow an election. You're right. We had an assassination attempt on a president just a few weeks ago. So, yeah, these are crazy, unprecedented times. Look, this isn't complicated. I don't want Trump back in the White House, but he's winning right now. He's got a comfortable lead. Joe Biden wasn't going to beat him. The Democrats found another candidate, and she has a legitimate shot at challenging him and beating him. I think the factor that all of us have underestimated, no matter where you stand on her as a candidate, is the enthusiasm. There was zero enthusiasm for Joe Biden. Kamala Harris, any other candidate, would have generated huge enthusiasm. That's a wild card. That's all. That's a wild card.
It's a reset. Piers, the whole election has been reset.
Let me bring Ben.
Here.
Ben, I know you've got to go in about 4 minutes, Ben. So let me ask you this, Ben. I mean, the money's been pouring in for Kamala Harris in record levels, if you believe what the Democrats are saying. 18, 90 million within 24 hours. And all right, you can cast a skeptical eye over the exact number, but clearly the Democratic machine is now pouring behind Kamala Harris. That will in itself energize the race in a way that Donald Trump would not have had to have dealt with if it was still CP Joe Biden. So I think there's a new challenge for him. You know, if I was advising Trump, but I'm not, but if I was, I would say to him, be very careful about going too ad hominem on Kamala Harris. You know, I would stick to her policies. I would stick to her record. You know, this is a woman who believed in defunding the police. This is a woman ultimately who was made the immigration czar and said, don't come in, and 8 million people came in, right? So there are lots of ways that you can go after Kamala Harris about her record. I think if Trump tries to do what he often does and go ad hominem with her, it could backfire.
Sure. Look, I think this is a blessing that she is now going to be the nominee, that this isn't going to be an open convention, because otherwise, who are you campaigning against for the next 30 days to the convention, right? You do 20% of the time with Kamala, 10% with Gavin Newsom, 5%, you know, with Shapiro. I mean, this was going to get really complicated. Now Joe Biden is gone. Donald Trump knows who he's running against. It's Kamala. You stick to her record and why she's so unpopular with the Democratic Party. But this is also, Piers, so different. The media, it was so depressed. The Democratic Party was so depressed. The donors had dried up the money for Joe Biden. They forced him out. Some would even describe it as a soft coup, where if you don't resign 25th and you're going to have some serious problems, he goes into hiding. Any other country this happens, our State Department say, we think there might be a coup attempt going on in another nation. And now we're at this reality. And I think what Democrats understand is this is their lifeboat. This is their second chance at holding on to power. So every mega donor says we want to keep power. Everyone in and around the White House that knows Kamala, we want the power. Every congressman that's running for re-election desperately needs a better candidate. Up ballot matters to down ballot races. And every other senator wants to keep power. So they are all in. And that's why every poll that's out right now is completely and utterly worthless. It means nothing. Do I believe that Donald Trump has a lead? Yes, but it's worthless because this is a total reset. It's a completely new race we've never seen before in American political history. It is a race to the finish. It's going to be something we've never witnessed. Now, if you're Trump, you stick to the basics. The economy's stupid. Kamala Harris is Joe Biden 2.0. She's unpopular, and she's going to give you exactly what you just saw for the last 4 years. But he has got to stay focused, because the one thing I'll say is the media is going to treat Kamala Harris like she's Princess Diana for the next 3.5 months. They will never betray her. She is now a beauty queen, and they love her.
Well, you can see that, and it does feel like a coronation. That may not be the smartest move by the Democrats, to make it look like they've basically ridden roughshod over democracy to make her the queen. Joe, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just quibble on that one point, Pierce. Look, a coup is when you lose an election and try to overthrow it. That's a coup. A president deciding not to run. No, hold on, Ben. Let me finish, then jump in. A president deciding not to run is not a coup. And this notion, Pierce, of a coronation. Biden decided not to run. Any Democrat could have thrown their hat in the ring. This isn't an election, it's a primary. The primary voters pick delegates. The delegates at the convention pick the nominee. This is not a coup, and any other Democrat could jump in and challenge her.
I'll say this last thing.
Well, I mean,
I'll say this last thing.
Dave Smith.
Look,
let me just ask Benny, do you have to go, or can you wait a couple of minutes, or what's your deal?
I've got 3 more minutes, yes.
All right, well, let Ben have his final blast back at Joe, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the panel.
I read this yesterday, and it came from an elected official, and it said, quote, if this was happening, referring to what's happening now politically, in any other country, the State Department would be calling this a coup attempt. The president in hiding, president, no pictures of him, letterhead that doesn't have a presidential seal, a signature that's been underlined that the president doesn't typically do, and yet we're acting like this is normal. Joe Biden was forced out. There was something that happened to him, whether it was medically,
Joe Biden was
when he was
forced
flying
out
back
by
from
his
Vegas.
own brain, Ben. Joe Biden's brain did a coup on Joe Biden.
Leave. He didn't want to leave. He did not want to leave. Days before, he was saying, I'm in this, I'm in this. And I think this was clearly the cabinet and other Democrats that said, you're either going to leave or we're going to force you out. You are done. And now we've got a president that's going to talk to the nation tomorrow night. I'm sorry. This happens in another country. We'd all be talking about it this way, but we're acting like it's normal. This is not normal.
What's so funny about you, Ben? What's so funny about Republicans is that this would never happen, because their God Emperor Donald Trump can literally do whatever he wants, and no Republican would ever step out of line to criticize him. No one would step out of line to say you shouldn't be president anymore. And you're so jealous that Democrats actually hold their own accountable. You're so jealous that we'd actually be like, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't run again.
I assure you, I'm not jealous.
The entire party right. It's just so funny. It's like, if you lose in November, you're going to run him again in 2028.
You tried to put him in prison. You tried to take his property. And then they tried to kill him. I'm not jealous of anybody that celebrates that.
Who tried to kill him? Ben, who tried to kill him?
A radical young 20-year-old tried to kill him.
Who's they?
And everybody's like, well, I love this the other day. They're like, well, what's the motive? He wanted to kill Donald Trump. That's the motive.
Ben, careful. You said they. They tried to kill him. Who's they?
People that hate Trump. People that hate Trump.
Wait.
That's what I'm saying. It's very simple.
A 20-year-old kid did it, right? A demented, lonely 20-year-old kid
who hated Donald Trump. People that hate Trump, that want to put him in jail, that want to take all of his things. They tried to overthrow the will of the people in the first election.
It's
Walsh. Walsh. Let me go back to the very beginning.
Let me jump in. I just want to say this. We don't actually know the motivation of the shooter, but if you want to look for blame as to how this 20-year-old deranged kid with an AR-15 was able to unload 8 bullets at President Trump, it's because the Secret Service dropped the ball in such spectacular fashion and left President Trump exposed so badly, which could have led to him being killed, and should have done, really. It was a miracle that he survived, that the director of Secret Service, Kim Cheadle, has today resigned, or probably been fired.
A week later.
So that is probably where my main blame would go, is their failure to protect the president. Now, listen, hang on a second, Joe. We've got to say goodbye to Ben, to be respectful to his time.
Thanks,
Ben,
guys.
thank you very much indeed for coming back on Uncensored. I appreciate it. We're joined by Chris Mowrey from the Chris and Harry Unplugged, and I'll come to CJ Pearson as well. But Dave Smith, you've been sitting next to me here, even though we're looking down barrels of different cameras. You wanted to get in there. You were aghast about something. I'm not quite sure what it was.
Well, look, okay, there's just a couple things here. First of all, I do understand why people object to the use of the term coup. However, for Joe to say, well, this was just Joe Biden made a decision, that's pretty misleading also. The truth is that Joe Biden did make his decision. His decision was to stay in the race. He made this very, very clear. Up to Sunday morning, on the Sunday morning news shows, campaign surrogates were going out saying he's staying in the race. It's Biden versus Trump. Now, it's not exactly that he made a decision. Big donors and political operatives and the corporate press all turned their back on him and said, we are going to force your hand. And essentially, he was forced out. On top of that, look, I'm not claiming to know anything that we don't know. It is incredibly bizarre that the President of the United States of America, a few weeks out from the convention, decided to pull out of the race and did not address the nation. Now, you can say he had COVID. I don't care. He's the sitting president of the United States. For it to come out on personal stationery and then in a tweet, he endorses Kamala Harris, and now we're being told we're going to hear from him tomorrow night. That is just incredibly bizarre, and it is understandable why people speculate about what was really going on behind the scenes. The truth is that none of us really know what type of internal pressure was put on Joe Biden, what type of threats were made. So the fact that people would speculate about that, I think, is totally reasonable. On the other point, the idea that Republicans would never question Donald Trump. He's their God emperor. They would never think about another nominee. The problem with this narrative from the left is that it just reality flies in the face of it. Look, there was a National Review entire issue dedicated to never Trump in 2016. Mitt Romney, the previous nominee, came out and gave a speech, anyone but Donald Trump. This year, all of the big donor money was going to DeSantis and Nikki Haley. All of the powerful forces within the Republican establishment have been trying to get anybody else except Donald Trump. The difference between Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is that Donald Trump, however you feel about him, has tens of millions of Americans who love him and want him to be the nominee. And there's no Democrat who has anything like that.
I agree. CJ, let me bring in CJ, who's been waiting patiently. Hang on, Francesca, I'll come to you in a moment. CJ Pearson, can you tell me what brat means, given it's the word that's all over the news, and you're probably the only one young enough on the panel to know what it means? Apart from Francesca.
As the resident Gen Zer here, it seems as if Kamala Harris is having a brat girl summer, which actually means that she actually doesn't know what's going on. It's a state of deliriousness. It's a state of delusion. It's like you're just going along to get along, but that's kind of how Kamala Harris has led her entire political career. She's just been a coconut falling from a coconut tree. She just lands in a place and hopes that the American people will go along with it as this coronation has taken place. Dave absolutely hit all the right points. Donald Trump went through a spirited Republican primary process where he knocked every single one of them out one by one. What's happening right now, which is so ironic and so hypocritical, is that the party that is supposedly so against voter suppression is now disenfranchising millions of Democrat voters who voted for Joe Biden to be their nominee. They bullied a senile old man out of office just so that they could have a chance at winning in November. It's disgusting, it's wrong, it's anti-democratic, and dare I say it's a threat to democracy.
Yo, you should vote Joe Biden. Vote Joe. You should bring him back into the race.
Hang on.
Defend him.
Hang on. Let me go to Chris. From Chris and Harry Unplugged, who's also been waiting a long time to get in here. Probably even younger, so knows even more what brat means. Kamala Harris, I mean, what do you make of the new threat to Donald Trump? He's got to tear up his entire playbook, which was to beat an old guy, to now go after a much younger black woman. It's a completely different proposition for Trump. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Republicans and Trump are panicking, and I think you've seen it in the last 10 or 20 minutes. If they want to run, if the PR play for Republicans wants to be that Democrats are a threat to democracy, that Democrats are doing something undemocratic, Donald Trump and Republicans like CJ Pearson want to run on that, I think Democrats are in a great position in November. They have nothing. And to the last point about, everybody in this party has to bend the knee to Donald Trump. CJ Pearson would not be sitting where he is if he didn't go and praise Donald Trump and have a Trump banner in his header. I mean, CJ's somebody who, in his primary election that he lost, he called voter fraud against his Republican counterpart. And so, in the Democrat world, we've had fierce debates about our candidate, and it's been hard. But we have values and morals that actually matter over just bowing the knee to one man. And so I think Democrats are in a great position, and she's clearly popular because she's fundraised more money than anyone in political history.
I wouldn't expect to hear anything less from a Democrat, from a DNC paid show like Chris Mowrey. But what I'll say to this is that Kamala Harris is nothing more than a pandering shadow. And she is in the same situation that Joe Biden is in. She is not running the show whatsoever. And what she'll realize is that Brat Girl Summer will not be enough to change the hearts and minds of America's young people, because under Kamala Harris, what you won't have is a Brat Girl Summer. What you will have is a Broke Girl Summer as a result of the runaway inflation that we're experiencing under the Biden-Harris administration, as a result of the record high gas prices we've seen under their administration. Their leadership is absent of any leadership.
Then you got nothing to worry about, CJ. Now, then, CJ, if you're right, if Kamala Harris is nothing, you should be smiling. You should be celebrating right now. You got nothing to worry about. Hosanna.
I am celebrating. I am smiling.
Good.
I mean, that's what I think is sort of just incredible about just two things I'll push back on. The idea that it's a coronation. Once again, in 2020, panel, how many primary challengers did incumbent President Donald Trump have?
Me
None.
And two other.
Why? Because he was the incumbent president. This is an incumbency, right? And so the idea that this is like, how dare they also, it's not democratic. No, Harris is the effing vice president, been on the ticket since Joe Biden was elected back in 2020. Obviously, people thought he was going to be the incumbent and run again. Then his brain did a coup on his body and himself and his whole campaign. And here we are where we are. The other thing about the donors, I think it's very funny, because the reason that Donald Trump on the other side picked your boy J.D. Vance, even though he hates facial hair, is because J.D. Vance came along with a bunch of venture capitalists, guys like Peter Thiel, Mark Andreessen, David Horowitz, to absolutely help this campaign out with all of their AI-funded tech crypto billionaire money that wants to put us all out of a job. In 3 years, this will just be a panel of AI experts, and honestly, God bless them.
Well, we have Chris Mowrey on the panel.
I don't think there's any robot in the world that could mirror what you're like, Francesca, I have to say. I think your position is safe.
True Brad.
It has to be a very sophisticated AI. CJ, let me just ask CJ, and I'll come to Dave to also join in on this. When you look at Kamala Harris, like I said, if Trump goes ad hominem, which is his normal preferred method of attack on any opponent, I think it could backfire. However, there is lots of stuff on Kamala's record which I think he can really pick her off about. Most notably, the fact that she's been the immigration czar for the United States of America for the last 2 years, when immigration has been running completely out of control. And if I was Trump, I'd just keep asking her, didn't you just have one job? Wasn't that the job you had to do? And even when she was asked, have you been to the border? She came out with this extraordinary response, well, I haven't been to Europe either, as if that was anything relevant to the discussion. So I think the way she's handled the one thing she was given special responsibility for, if I'm the Republicans, I'm going after that morning, noon and night.
No, Piers, I think you're absolutely right. I think we do, find ourselves, in a hole when we continue to talk things about, her sexual history or all those things. I think there's no need to discuss those things. I think there are a lot of other things that are disqualifying about Kamala Harris, including her blatant hypocrisy. She locked up countless of nonviolent young black men for smoking weed, only to go in the Breakfast Club and brag about how much weed she smoked. This is also someone, as you said, who was in control of our national security as it relates to the border and absolutely dropped the ball there time and again. She has shown that she is not deserving of promotion. The only reason that we are even having this conversation about her as a nominee of the Democrat Party, aside from a coordination, is because she's a DEI hire. She was a DEI hire when she became vice president because he had to get black women on board with this campaign. They couldn't skip over Kamala Harris because they were afraid of upsetting black women if they did so. That is exactly why she bided her time. She covered up the fact that Joe Biden was mentally unfit and mentally unwell and mentally incapable of carrying on the banner of the Democrat Party because she knew that she could not win an open Democratic primary herself. She knew that she did not have the fortitude to do so. And we saw that. It was demonstrable in 2020. She didn't win a single primary state. She didn't even make it to Iowa, Piers. And if you think that if she can't beat Pete Buttigieg and all of those folks, Tulsi Gabbard, you think that she can beat Donald J. Trump after what he has endured, after the feckless prosecutions, after the attempted assassination, then, I've got some great real estate in Alaska to sell you. It's insane.
Okay, I want to bring in Dave Smith about one particular point. I saw one of the polls today, which was matching up Kamala Harris against Trump. Significantly amongst young people, a big gap between them. And a lot of that people are putting down to the fact that young people actually did feel that what Trump did when he was shot was a remarkably ballsy thing. And it became a really big social media sort of emblem of defiance and strength and courage and all these things, which were things that maybe young people hadn't associated with Trump. But suddenly they saw this image of him punching the air, blood all over his face, surviving an assassination attempt. And they thought, you know what, that's, as Mark Zuckerberg said, probably the first time in his life, that was badass by Trump. How significant do you think the failed assassination attempt is going to be, particularly with young people?
Well, I think that it helped Donald Trump tremendously. I think it's one of those things where it's like I remember going to the opera with my wife, and I've never been to the opera before. But when you hear like an unbelievably talented singer at the opera, you're just like, whoa, that's incredible. It's almost an involuntary reaction. And there is something about seeing someone while there's bullets spraying, they don't even know if they're hit yet, and they're given the fist. Even if you despise Donald Trump, I think most people would admit, yeah, that was a good moment for him. He looked good there. I think to the point that you guys were making before, again, look, I'm a libertarian, and so I already know I'm going to lose. So I kind of have an advantage on some of you guys. Like, I'm not married to either side here. But I think people blind themselves with narratives when they're all in on one camp. And to hear you guys, the Democrats on the panel saying like, oh, the Republicans are in freak out mode or something like that. Guys, you literally just removed your candidate to go with another candidate after years of pretending that the emperor had clothes, while the rest of us were all talking about the guy who was clearly suffering through severe cognitive decline. Finally, you guys had to admit it. You pulled him out there. You're now going with a deeply unpopular vice presidential candidate. Look, good luck, but it's a big uphill battle. The fact is that the spin now is that it was just Joe Biden's age. That was the only issue that he slowed down. The truth is that if you look at every single poll, the two big issues here are the economy and immigration. I'm not a kid. I don't understand any of your black girl summer references. I don't know what brat means, okay? I'm a dad in my 40s. We've lived through, over the last couple of years, the worst price inflation in my life and the worst immigration crisis in my lifetime. This is a major problem. Kamala Harris is married to this administration, and Donald Trump's got a lot of red meat to run against. That's what this election's going to come down to, and it favors Trump.
Yeah, I agree. Chris, do you want to respond to that? Let me get Chris to respond, then I'll come to you, Joe.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to say, as a Gen Zer, I just disagree with this. This consistent notion that Kamala Harris is unpopular. Again, yesterday we saw the largest fundraising day in American political history through Act Blue. Grassroots donors, $5, $10, $25. Gen Z is excited for a candidate objectively that's younger, a woman, and somebody who's been like a champion on things like climate and gun reform, etc. And I think that Gen Z specifically is a generation, me, myself, I've never seen America at peace. It's been nothing but chaos since I was born in 2002.
Thank you, President Joe Biden,
and we're looking back now and saying, wow, this is really at a boiling point. And what has caused this? And what's caused this is Trump and the MAGA movement doing nothing but pushing division all the time with the lies and the disgusting, hateful rhetoric. And I think that Gen Z is fired up to move on, to get candidates that actually care about us.
And Pearson,
I think one of the bigger issues.
Let me ask you this. You talk about hateful rhetoric from the right to the left, and that definitely has been. It's indisputable. But what about the hateful rhetoric from the left to the right? For example, for 8 years, I've heard people on the left, from the top down, refer to Trump as the new Hitler, as Adolf Hitler, as if somehow he's presiding over a Nazi-style regime, which, if you're too young to remember, perhaps, but the Nazis killed 12 million people, including murdering 6 million Jews in a Holocaust. So it's hard to imagine a more offensive or vile slur or more hateful rhetoric than to compare Donald Trump, who's done none of those things, to Adolf Hitler. So do you accept that people on the left have been just as guilty of hateful rhetoric and contributing to the general toxicity of the debate as people on the right?
Sure, but I do want to point out that, the person who's actually called Donald Trump's America's Hitler is J.D. Vance, his current running mate. J.D. Vance was someone who is very staunchly never
that was
Trump.
wrong too.
If you look at elected officials across the board, Democrats have consistently been the ones to calm the tensions. And look, I disagree with calling him America's Hitler, but if I call Donald Trump a dictator or a threat to democracy, I think it's almost dishonest to not call him that. This is somebody who tried to overturn an election he didn't win with evidence that he didn't win it. And so I don't understand how it's hateful to say that he's a threat to democracy or he's moving us toward authoritarianism. And again, I think that the fact that J.D. Vance is the one who said things like he's America's Hitler goes to the fact that, you have to give up all your morals and all your values and bow to Donald Trump in this party.
Piers, that
all right,
is
let me get a response
insane.
to that from CJ.
Piers, that's absolutely insane. For Chris to sit here and say that it's dishonest for him not to call Donald Trump a dictator is absolutely laughable. Maybe if Chris actually visited a country with a real dictatorship, he would realize that under a system of governance where real dictators did exist, the conversation, the debate, the discourse that we're having wouldn't even at all be possible. But that's all they traffic in, is all of this hyperbolic rhetoric that has actually no semblance of reality, because they don't actually know how to defeat the president, because he delivered for the American people time and again during his presidency. We had the lowest black unemployment rate. We had record economic growth. We had a secure southern border. All of those things are policy wins that Joe Biden can't brag about. It's exactly why Kamala Harris has to talk about a black girl summer. But here's the reality. Under Kamala Harris, you're going to have a broke girl summer, a broke girl fall, a broke girl winter, and a broke girl spring. That is what their policies do.
Come on,
you said that already. We heard you.
Yeah, you've said that already. Great. You've got 100 more days to say that. God bless you. Your candidate's winning. We'll see if Kamala Harris can catch him or not. Pierce, just a couple quick points. To Dave Smith, I appreciate the fact that he's a dad in his 40s. I'm a dad in my 60s. Look, I don't belong to either party. I'm not a Democrat. Dave and I probably agree on most policy issues. The difference is I think Trump is a unique existential threat to our democracy. So I'll support whoever the Democratic nominee is. Pierce, to you, you made a great point early. You said we're living in unprecedented times. A month ago, an 81-year-old candidate for president had a debate and showed that he was not at all ready to continue to be a candidate. He was too old. And the entire Democratic Party rightfully panicked. It is a party process. It's not an election. The party convinced him to step aside, and he made that final decision. This is how the process in each party works. There's nothing undemocratic about it.
Yeah. I just want to say that I think it is wrong to compare Donald Trump to Hitler.
Yeah, Francesca,
I agree. I think it's absolutely wrong. If you're going to compare him to someone, it's obviously Mussolini, okay? Much more of a showman, great jawline. Wow. I think that is where it happens. And look, Donald Trump by his own admission said he would be a dictator, but only on day one. So guys, let's just listen to him, take him at his word. But
you know the problem, Francesca, listen, here's the problem. Funny though your quip just was, and maybe you meant it or not, the truth is, I've just noticed that people on the left, when it comes to Donald Trump, they lose their collective minds. The reality about the checks and balances of the American democratic process was they were actually very robust. Trump may not have accepted the result of the 2020 election, but he's not in the White House. He's not president of the United States. he had to go that
Piers,
day.
have you read?
Bang, out
First
the
of all,
door.
we know.
So the checks and
we know
balances did work.
I mean, I don't understand. We know you talk to Trump regularly, Piers. I'm surprised you don't have a white bandage on your ear right now, honestly. And we've seen and we've read all 920 pages of Project 2025, and in it says that instead of the police, the military should be patrolling the streets.
Which the president has disavowed time and again.
That is
the president has said that he does not support Project 2025.
Even though every single person who wrote it was a former Trump advisor. Come on, give me a break. Stephen Miller is in
President Trump himself has said that he does not support Project 2025. We're supposed to think that you believe more about what President Trump believes than what he has said himself he believes. It's
CJ,
crazy.
Oh, you know what's in his heart. You know what's in his heart.
If you want to see what President Trump believes, go to DonaldJTrump.com, read Agenda 47.
What's in his heart?
Read Agenda 47.
How about this? How about we don't go with what's in his heart and we go with the 4-year track record? I mean, the problem here is that, and look, to your point, obviously the rhetoric on both sides has been elevated tremendously over the last few years. It's been very divisive times in this country. And both sides are guilty of this or right to do it, however you look at it. But people do lose their collective minds when it comes to Donald Trump. Look, these comparisons, the idea that he's some Hitlerian figure is ridiculous. Even the comparisons to Mussolini, this is all silliness. Donald Trump was president for 4 years, okay? He did a lot of things bad. I was a big critic of his foreign policy. His fiscal policy was very bad. I do not think he handled COVID well, but these are problems kind of similar to previous presidents before that. His rhetoric is much more bombastic than other presidents were, okay? That's the reality that we're dealing in. And the fact that you guys have to take this up to 11 as if there's some existential threat to the republic that isn't, by the way, you want to know the real existential threat to, hold on just 1 second, let me finish. The real existential threat to our republic right now is that debt is the interest on our debt is overtaking our entire budget. And this is something that Democrats and Republicans are both guilty of. So they don't want to talk about that because it's, it condemns both of them. But the reality of the situation is that whatever happened on January 6th that got out of control, there certainly was violence there. Donald Trump got on a plane and went back to Mar-a-Lago. He was never calling in the military. There was never a chance that he was going to institute a dictatorship in the United States of America. This is all election nonsense. And I'll tell you something, Democrats, you better figure out something else to run against, because this whole Kamala Harris is a prosecutor and Donald Trump is a felon. The American people have rejected this already. No one cares about these charges that wouldn't have been brought to any other former president, okay? This isn't going to do it. You got to have something of substance. The problem is what you guys could actually run against is that Donald Trump was such a disaster through all of 2020, and he kept Fauci on the job, and he kept Americans locked down. The problem is you guys were criticizing him for not locking down harder. So I don't know what angle you're going to find. There's plenty of flaws on him. The problem is you guys are worse on most of the issues he's bad on.
David, be better than that. Quit saying you guys. Everybody opposes Donald Trump for their own reason. Quit saying you guys. And I'm sorry, quit saying those of us who do believe, and you can disagree, Dave, those of us who do believe Trump is a unique threat to democracy, quit saying we've lost our minds. Come on, man. I haven't lost my mind.
You've absolutely lost your mind.
I'm older.
Absolutely lost your mind.
Hold on, CJ. Let me finish, CJ. I'm older than you, Dave and CJ. In my lifetime, I've never seen a president lose an election and refuse to concede. I've never seen a president try to overthrow the results of that election. You can disagree with the severity of that.
But Joe, hold on 1 second. But let's just be real specific here. Hold on.
Real specific. January 6th, 2021. Real specific for you, my guy.
Wait, this is Dave and CJ, I feel like are not willing to look into the deeper aspects. I mean, Donald Trump is someone who's had a whole fake electors plot, sent fake electors to my state of Georgia and tried to, essentially take the will of the people away. He had the Department of Justice in the Oval Office demanding that they sign a letter that with a DOJ header that said they believed there was election interference, and 2 DOJ officials resigned over that. Again, it is so dishonest to say that Donald Trump was normal or that people are losing their minds when they say he's a threat to democracy. I mean, he tried and went through every single illegal and legal action to overturn the election. And why people are freaked out is because if you have another Trump presidency where he could install loyalists, all of a sudden those checks and balances that Piers is referring to
let me just, because
could
you guys are
disappear.
making different arguments here, but let me
invalidated under
hang on,
a
don't
Trump
talk over each
presidency.
other.
The Constitution.
Dave, and CJ, let me just make one more
finish
point.
CJ, and then I'll come to Dave, and then we'll wrap.
I'll shut up for good. One more point. It's now Kamala Harris against Donald Trump.
Joe.
It's Kamala Harris against Donald Trump. If Kamala Harris loses in November, Kamala Harris will concede and she'll accept the will of the people. If Donald Trump loses in November, he won't and he won't. That is a threat.
Well,
I just want to.
Okay, but well, look, here's the, okay.
Piers,
if I were to
think
say,
this is
and I want
important
like honestly,
they have
Piers,
not learned
tell
their
me,
lesson.
Hold on, let me just respond to.
Let Dave respond, then I'll come to CJ.
So if I were to say right now, I want to overthrow democracy in the United States of America and institute a dictatorship, I don't think anyone on the panel is very freaked out by that, because I have no power to do it. Like, it doesn't really matter if I want to do it or not. Now, I will kind of agree with you guys. I just thought the way Trump handled the 2020 election was terrible. I did think he was kind of using like bully tactics when he called the Secretary of State in Georgia there. But the bottom line is that he had no mechanism to actually overthrow democracy, and that was a totally like impotent attempt to even do it. So listen, hold on, let me just finish, because I let you guys go for a second. Let me just finish making my point here. This is the problem with you guys going to this well over and over again. It was never actually a threat to overthrow democracy. If you want to talk about people who haven't accepted the results of elections, Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, Stacey Abrams, they all have said these were illegitimate elections or there was outside interference. There is nothing. Look, you guys are, listen, just hear me for a second. Consider, yes, they conceded. Okay, so they conceded and he didn't. Okay, so by the magical power of saying, I concede, that somehow makes us a democracy and not a dictatorship. You guys are obsessing over this thing that most Americans don't actually care that much about.
I agree. We've got to leave it there. We've run out of time. Great panel. Thank you all very much indeed, and come back soon. I appreciate it. Well, I'm joined now by the host of No Spin News and the author of forthcoming book, Confronting the Presidents, Bill O'Reilly. Bill, great to see you.
Is it really, Piers? Is it really great to see me? I don't think I've ever heard that before. People usually flee when I'm in the room.
You know, I used to watch your old show in this very building for many years. And you and I knew each other a bit when I was working at CNN, and it's good to talk to you. I can't actually think of many people better placed or more experienced in this world of presidency and presidents than you to try and put this in perspective. If you're a young person, you might think, well, this is all a bit crazy. If you're a bit older, like me or you, this is completely unprecedented, isn't it, what we're going through now?
Yeah. Woodrow Wilson is the closest thing to it. At the end of his second term, he had a stroke. Nobody knew about it, kept it from the press and the public. His wife, Edith Wilson, ran the government for about 18 months. I write about that in my upcoming book, Confronting the Presidents, which evaluates each of the 45 men, whether they hurt or helped America. It's going to be a big bestseller. But anyway, Wilson is the closest to Joe Biden resigning because of health reasons. LBJ, 1968, also has similarities because his policies in Vietnam particularly overwhelmed him. They were such bad policies. And he couldn't win. The party knew it. They wanted Robert Kennedy to run instead of LBJ, and LBJ acquiesced to that. So there is precedent in American history.
But I think I was talking sort of more collectively about the last few weeks in the sense of the debate, which was probably the most extraordinary debate we've ever seen, certainly on television in presidential history. Then the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, where he came within a quarter of an inch of being killed. And then Biden stepping aside and so late in the day. That collectively feels to me like a pretty extraordinary few weeks. How do you think this now plays out, Bill?
Well, it's been a lively 9 days here in the colonies. I'll tell you that. It goes back to the traditional campaign now. So it's Harris against Trump. Democrats against Republicans. Who's going to win? There's a debate scheduled September 10th. I think that'll come off, and Americans will decide. The candidates couldn't be further apart. There's absolutely no common ground between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, none. So like your government and voters over in Great Britain, it's a stark contrast. But it does go back into the traditional realm now of campaigning for 4 months, and then we all vote in November.
You know, I spoke to Donald Trump on Saturday night after he appeared at the comeback rally after the assassination attempt. And I did find it quite extraordinary that he not only found the strength in the moment of being shot to stand up and show that defiant raised fist and say, fight, 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 but that within a week, he was back on a stage in public, exposed for 2 hours in front of tens of thousands of people, none of whom he would have known. I mean, that does take a lot of personal strength to do that. How impactful will that be, do you think, on election voting? The fact that Trump has shown himself, when it really mattered, I guess, to be a proper leader.
He'll pick up a few votes, but not that many. I mean, his favorability rating this week in America is up to its highest level I think it's ever been. But that'll fade. It's a lot like the Teddy Roosevelt, 1912. Roosevelt got shot in the chest by some nut, but he had a speech and his eyeglass case inside his jacket, and it blunted the bullet. And Teddy, being Teddy, robust, went along with the speech and didn't stop, and then kept his campaign. Trump is a lot like Teddy Roosevelt. He's a guy who's out there. He's larger than life. He's got a lot of energy. He's not going to let the bastards get him down. He's fight, 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 fight. And that's his personality. He's very pugnacious, a lot like Winston Churchill, but not with Churchill's sense of decorum, which when I spoke to Trump while he was making his decision to run this time around, I said, you ought to read Winston Churchill's comeback papers on how he did it after the British threw him out after World War II. He regained the prime ministership. You ought to read how he did it. Now, I'm sure Trump didn't do that. He's not a reader. He doesn't do that. But both Churchill and Trump, and Teddy Roosevelt, big, larger-than-life, charismatic people, and that evokes both love and hate. So it's the bland men that, you know, kind of are in the background. They don't evoke passion, but the big men do.
In terms of his campaign, obviously, and he said this to me on Saturday, that he hoped Joe Biden would stay in the race as long as possible because clearly he could see that he was losing his faculties and his cognitive ability to even know what day it is. Now he's got someone in Kamala Harris who has to date been pretty unpopular, has not done particularly well as vice president, has a record that can be picked apart. But certainly, I watched her last night. You know, she's telegenic. She's clearly not stupid. She's eloquent. She's articulate. She has a warmth about her. She has a certain charisma. And she now has the whole power of the Democrat machinery crashing behind her, including a ton of money, a ton of high-profile people, and so on. That will certainly help her. Can she possibly beat Trump, do you think?
Sure. Not only does she have the Democratic machine behind her, but she's got the media behind it, the American corporate media. So that's now an alliance, all right? So in America, we don't have a free press anymore because it's run by corporations, and the corporations make calculations based on profit and power. So it's not like it used to be when I was working for ABC News and CBS News as a correspondent all over the world, where we were told to gather information and present it no matter what it was. That's gone. Now it's point of view journalism. We're talking to the choir. We want the choir to watch us or read our paper, and that's where we make our money. So you better damn well do it, or you're not going to be working here. So free press, forget it. That doesn't exist. So when you have 85% of the American media lined up behind Kamala Harris and all the big money Hollywood people and Wall Street people, BlackRock, things like that, she has got plenty of resources. But you make a mistake if you think she's articulate. She is not. She can read the teleprompter. She can't think extemporaneously. She can't. And you're going to see her being protected from people like me and you. We're not going to get to interview Kamala Harris. She'll never sit for interviews like that, ever. It's going to be the same strategy that Biden employed for 3.5 years. You stay away from the press. You don't hold press conferences. You select cupcake interviewers to come in and even have to give the questions in advance to Kamala Harris. That will happen. You're not going to see her on the firing line. And the Democratic strategy is the same as it's always been. We aren't running on our record because they have no record to run on. We're running against Trump, who's the devil. That is it. Trump's the devil, so vote for us. You can't defend open borders. You can't defend all of the price rises on everything imaginable in the United States. You can't defend it. It's indefensible. You can lie about it, and certainly both parties do, because the press is so lazy and stupid that it won't call those lies out. Like, you stupid, it won't any longer. So we have a big mess here, and it's going to come down to whether there are enough of us in the media to tell people, here it is. You vote for Kamala Harris, you're voting for the most liberal president in history by far. You vote for Donald Trump, you're voting for a guy who's volatile. And I don't believe he's a threat to democracy. I don't believe any of that. I wrote a book, The United States of Trump. I chronicle his style. But he's got 4 years. And most Americans prospered during those 4 years. They did. The economic stats prove it. But Trump himself is a rather undisciplined character. And when I talk to him, which is, I've known him 35 years, I keep telling him, Mr. President, step back. You want to win? That's your best revenge. Discipline yourself. Last night he called Kamala Harris dumb as a rock. Why? Is that going to get Donald Trump one vote? The people who despise Kamala Harris already believe she's dumb as a rock. Do you have to tell them for the 80th time? No. Advance your cause by pointing out what you did and what you will do in specific terms.
Yeah, I was saying earlier, actually, on this very point, I think if he goes too ad hominem with Kamala Harris, he's going to play into her hands, and she will use that as a, look at what he's like, he's a monster, blah, blah, blah. If he just picks her off on, sorry?
Yeah, remember, she's going to do that.
Go ahead.
Okay, Kamala Harris, her whole campaign is ad hominem, the Latin, to the man, okay? That's her whole campaign. He's a felon, he's a rapist, he's a racist, he's this, he's that. But and Trump does not react well to that, obviously. I don't think you would. But at this point in history, the best strategy is let her do that. All right, if she wants to be a gutter snipe, let her. Because Americans aren't stupid. They can see.
The trouble is, Bill, if you think about Donald Trump, and I've known him a long time too, 20 years, not as long as you, but his ability to rise above that kind of thing is very limited.
But he's smart enough to do it. So all that means is he has to want to do it.
How important will the debate be, do you think? Because obviously the last one with Biden turned out to be unbelievably consequential. I've got a feeling that him against Kamala Harris on September the 10th, it could be equally consequential, couldn't it?
Probably not. Number one, the fix is in already. Disney, ABC is holding the debate. They hate Trump. They hate him, hate his guts. I hope the rules are the same so that the microphones are muted when the candidates aren't speaking. That will help Trump. But Kamala Harris will get out there and she'll just attack him one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And Trump is probably going to be provoked in doing the same thing. And so nobody will get anything. If Trump would step back and discipline himself and use a Reagan line, there you go again. What about the border? What about the prices in the grocery store? What about you bailing out rioters after George Floyd? I mean, Kamala Harris got 50 things that you can go after that she cannot answer. 50. Now, do you think the ABC News moderators will ask any of the 50? They will not. Okay, they won't. And that's why I say the fix is in. See, when I talk to my overseas friends, they don't understand what's really happening here in America. I do. I run an independent news agency, which is the most successful independent agency in the world. In the world. Because I don't do that stuff. I'm a fact-based guy, not an ideologue. I'm not a party apparatchik. But overseas, people don't understand the absolute chaos that there is in the political realm here in America.
There's also, I mean, people talk a lot about the division in America being never as bad as it is today. Do you agree with that, Bill? I mean, I think back to the 60s and how unbelievably toxic that decade was, and with a number of assassinations of presidents and then his brother and then Martin Luther King and so on. And that was a pretty extraordinary decade. Do you feel that America is more or less divided today than it was then?
Excellent question, because you framed it properly. A lot of people ask the divided question, but they don't frame it the way you did, which is excellent. Civil War run-up was the most divisive time in American history. The Revolutionary War run-up was the second. 50% of the colonists supported the king here, okay? Only 50% wanted to break away. Both of those override what's happening now. The 60s was based on one issue. Vietnam was an issue division. Now it's a cultural division. You have traditional Americans like me that understand the country is noble and strong because we rely on a justice system that's fair, on patriotism, and on hard work. You have a progressive movement that wants to put skin color and gender above achievement. That division is never going to be healed. There's never going to be common ground there, ever. And people are furious. Families break up over it. So the cultural divide here at this point in history is enormous. And the only thing that might heal that is a charismatic leader who would emerge and talk common sense to the folks, to level with the folks. Look, we're all Americans, and this is what you have to do to prosper. And stop with the DEI stuff and the liberals are the devil stuff. Stop. All right? Let's get solutions to our problems. And we are in short supply with that right now.
It's very timely, the book you've got coming, Confronting the Presidents. In that you talk about all the presidents of the United States. We've heard a lot of people say Trump was the worst president of all time. Others say he was the greatest. We've heard Trump call Joe Biden this week the worst of all time. Others say he's been one of the most effective presidents of modern times. How do you rank Trump based on his first 4 years and Joe Biden's tenure in terms of their presidencies?
Okay, so Confronting the Presidents is out September 10th, and it's going to be an enormous best-selling book. I am the most successful nonfiction author in the world. Did you know that? In the world.
I did know that.
Okay, yeah. Well, good, because most people don't, because the press will never write about it. But this book is very focused. We don't rank them, okay? But I make it clear that Abraham Lincoln is the best president ever because of all he had to overcome. And James Buchanan, Lincoln's, who led into Lincoln, is the worst because he was a coward, he was corrupt, and he allowed the South to rise in its rebellion and did absolutely nothing to protect the Union. Joe Biden, I have ranked the second worst president in our history right now. And that will stand because he's done now. And the reason I did that was because Biden created problems. He didn't solve any problems. He created them. It's Joe Biden alone who opened the southern border. And now we have between 10 and 15 foreign nationals in this country unsupervised. He did that by himself. And he has never once explained why he did it. Ever. Now, you can't create a massive social and fiscal problem like that and be ranked anywhere near as an effective president. And then I can go down the list. Under Biden, working class Americans are suffering grievously. Real wages are down. People don't have any money in the bank. They can barely make their bills. The public school system has collapsed. DEI, just trying to get by that, is insane. This isn't equal justice for all here. You can commit a violent crime in most major American cities, and they won't even hold you on bail, even if you have a gun, if you're in a progressive district. What's Biden on that? Where is he on that? I can run down the list. You name the issue, I can tell you how Biden screwed it up. So he's the second worst. And we back that up in the book with facts, not emotion.
Bill, I can't wait to read it. I've read a lot of your books. You're a terrific writer. And like I said, I was aware of how successful they are and how popular they are. So it was good to see you, I said at the start of the interview, and it's been good to interview you. Thank you very much.
Anytime. Have me back after the book comes out and you read it. We'll have a good time.
I'd love that. Thanks a lot, Bill.